You probably know the story of Marie Antoinette, the extravagant Queen of France who supposedly said let them eat cake, and met her end at the guillotine. But the textbook version often skips over the brutal, heartbreaking details of her final months. What really happened to the last Queen of France after the monarchy fell? The reality is far more harrowing than most people imagine. Let's uncover the true story of Marie Antoinette's final days. After the storming of the Tuileries Palace in August 1792, the royal family was imprisoned. Their first stop was the grim, medieval temple fortress in Paris. Initially, they were kept together, King Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette, their two children Marie Arce and Louis Charles, and the king's sister, Madame Elisabeth. They tried to maintain a semblance of normal family life, with lessons for the children and shared meals. But this fragile domesticity wouldn't last. The political climate was growing more radical by the day. In December 1792, Louis XVI was put on trial by the National Convention. He was found guilty of high treason and sentenced to death. On January 21, 1793, came the moment that shattered Marie Antoinette's world forever. The family was allowed one final, agonizing farewell. Imagine the scene: a distraught queen, two terrified children clinging to their father, promising to see him the next morning, promise he knew he couldn't keep. The next day, from their prison window, they heard the cannons fire, signaling that the King of France, her husband, was dead. From that moment on, Marie Antoinette became a widow, known to her captors as the Widow Capet, a derogatory reference to the Capetian dynasty. She fell into a deep, silent depression, barely speaking or eating, dressing only in black mourning clothes for the rest of her life. She found her only solace in her children, particularly her young son, Louis Charles, who was now, in the eyes of royalists, King Louis XVII. This, of course, made him a threat to the new republic. On the night of July 3, 1793, the Committee of Public Safety made its cruelest move yet. Guards burst into her cell and forcibly removed her son, the 8-year-old Louis Charles. Accounts describe a heart-wrenching scene. Marie Antoinette physically blocked the door, pleading and fighting for 2 hours, refusing to let them take her boy. She only relented when the guards threatened to kill both of her children on the spot. It was the last time she would ever see her son. He was taken to a separate, darker cell in the temple, where he was subjected to horrific neglect and abuse, eventually dying 2 years later. A month after this devastating separation, on August 2nd, Marie Antoinette herself was taken from the temple, leaving her daughter and sister-in-law behind. She was transferred to the Conciergerie prison, a place grimly nicknamed the antechamber to the guillotine. Her new home was a damp, dark, tiny cell, far worse than her quarters at the temple. She was under constant surveillance, with 2 guards inside her cell at all times, separated from her only by a simple screen. There was no privacy, not even for the most personal moments. Here, her health rapidly deteriorated. She was suffering from what was likely uterine cancer, causing severe hemorrhages. Yet, she received almost no medical care. Despite the pain and constant humiliation, contemporary accounts describe her as maintaining a remarkable sense of dignity. She mended her own clothes until her eyesight failed, and she had to ask for help. She was isolated, sick, and grieving, but she refused to let her captors see her break. Her trial began on October 14, 1793. It was a complete sham, a show trial designed to justify a predetermined outcome. The charges were absurd and contradictory, ranging from treason and depleting the national treasury to orchestrating orgies at Versailles. The prosecution was desperate to secure a conviction, and they resorted to the most depraved accusation imaginable. They brought her son, Louis Charles, to testify against her. Under coercion, the boy was manipulated into accusing his own mother of incest. When this accusation was read out in court, Marie Antoinette, who had remained calm and composed throughout the trial, finally broke her silence. She rose to her feet and turned not to the judges, but to the women in the courtroom gallery. She said, "I appeal to all mothers present in this room. Is such a crime possible?" Her raw, maternal anguish was so powerful that it shifted the mood in the room. Even the hostile crowd of revolutionary women, the tricodiuses, who knitted while watching the guillotine, were said to have murmured in sympathy. The prosecutor, seeing he had overplayed his hand, quickly moved on, but it didn't matter. The verdict was a foregone conclusion. After a trial lasting just 2 days, Marie Antoinette was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to death. She was taken back to her cell to await the inevitable. Given a pen and paper, she wrote a final, moving letter to her sister-in-law, Madame Elizabeth. In it, she spoke of her innocence, her forgiveness for her enemies, and her deep love for her children. She asked Elizabeth to look after them and to tell them never to seek revenge for their parents' deaths. This letter, however, would never reach its intended recipient. It was intercepted by the Revolutionary Tribunal and only discovered decades later. On the morning of October 16, 1793, her execution day, her final humiliations were carried out. A priest was sent to her, but she politely refused his services, as he was a constitutional priest who had sworn allegiance to the Republic, not the Pope. They cut her hair short and rough, a final indignity. Unlike her husband, who was granted a private carriage, she was forced into an open cart, the kind used for common criminals. Her hands were bound tightly behind her back. As the cart rumbled through the streets of Paris, she was subjected to the jeers and insults of the crowd. She sat upright, pale but unflinching. One famous, perhaps apocryphal, story tells of how Jacques-Louis David, the revolutionary artist, sketched her on her way to the scaffold, capturing a portrait of a proud, defiant woman, even in her final moments. At a little past noon, the cart reached the Place de la Revolution, now the Place de la Concorde, where the guillotine stood waiting. She climbed the steps of the scaffold with the steady composure that stunned the onlookers. Her final words were not a grand political statement, but a simple, human apology. She accidentally stepped on the executioner's foot and said, "Pardon me, monsieur, I did not do it on purpose." Then, she was placed on the plank. A moment later, the blade fell. The executioner held her head up to the crowd, and a cry of "Vive la République! Long live the Republic!" erupted. She was 37 years old. Her body was unceremoniously thrown into an unmarked mass grave. The story of Marie Antoinette's final days is not one of a frivolous queen, but of a wife, a mother, and a woman stripped of everything: her husband, her children, her dignity, and finally, her life. While her early reign was marked by extravagance, her end was one of immense suffering and surprising fortitude. It's a stark reminder of the human cost of revolution and the dark, often ignored details that lie beneath the surface of history. Thanks for watching. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden corners of history. See you next time.